Vasily Emelianenko was nervous. His entire unit of rugged Ilyushin-2 Stormavik ground attack aircraft had just decimated a German-controlled airfield in eastern Ukraine. The Stormbirds had swiftly risen from the hills and rained hell on 2 rows of Luftwaffe aircraft parked below. Despite the low altitude at which they were flying, German machine gun fire did little damage to the Stormavik's thick steel armor. However, a few moments later, one lucky shot made its way to Emelianenko's engine, and his aircraft barely reached the tall pines surrounding the enemy airfield. With oil pressure rapidly plummeting to zero, Emelianenko headed towards Soviet lines, while German fighters relentlessly chased him. His Stormavik then made a hard landing in open terrain, and the young pilot had to run into the woods before a German sniper could pick him up. It was thanks to the outstanding resilience of the Stormavik, whose entire forward fuselage was constructed from pure steel armor, that Emelianenko survived. This incredible durability would become the hallmark of one of the most influential aircraft of World War II. The Soviet Union's Ilyushin-2 Stormavik stands as the most produced military aircraft in aviation history, with over 36,183 units manufactured during the war. More importantly, it represents a revolutionary approach to aircraft design that would forever change the nature of close air support and ground attack operations. From the desperate early days of Operation Barbarossa to the final assault on Berlin, the aircraft known to Soviet pilots as Ilyusha and to German forces as the concrete plane carved out a legendary reputation as the ultimate flying tank. The genesis of this remarkable aircraft can be traced back to the early 1930s, when military strategists across Europe and the United States recognized the need for specialized ground attack aircraft. The traditional approach of converting fighters or bombers for ground support roles had proven inadequate against increasingly sophisticated anti-aircraft defenses. The Soviet Union, with its emphasis on supporting ground forces, was particularly interested in developing a dedicated attack aircraft that could withstand intense ground fire while delivering devastating strikes against enemy positions. Early attempts by designer Dmitry Pavlovich Grigorovich resulted in the TSH-1 and TSH-2 armored biplanes, but Soviet engines of the time lacked sufficient power to provide these heavy aircraft with acceptable performance. The breakthrough came in 1938, when Sergei Vladimirovich Ilyushin, perhaps the Soviet Union's most gifted aircraft designer, approached the problem from an entirely different angle. Rather than simply adding armor plates to an existing design, Ilyushin conceived of an aircraft where the armor itself would serve as the primary structural element. The revolutionary TSK-B-55 prototype represented a fundamental departure from conventional aircraft construction. Ilyushin's team created an armored shell weighing 700 kilograms or 1,540 pounds that protected not only the crew but also the engine, radiators, and fuel tanks. This armor shell, ranging from 4 to 8 millimeters or 0.16 to 0.31 inches in thickness, comprised approximately 15% of the aircraft's total weight of over 4,700 kilograms or 10,400 pounds. Unlike traditional bolt-on armor, this protective shell functioned as a load-bearing structural component, saving considerable weight while providing unprecedented protection. The prototype first flew on October 2, 1939, with test pilot Vladimir Kokinaki at the controls. Initial trials revealed both the promise and challenges of Ilyushin's innovative approach. The TSK-B-55 was powered by a Mikulin AM-35 engine, producing 1,022 kilowatts or 1,371 horsepower. But this power plant was optimized for high-altitude performance, rather than the low-level operations required for ground attack missions. The aircraft proved overweight and underpowered, prompting a complete redesign. The solution came with the development of the TSK-B-57, a lighter single-seat variant, powered by the more powerful Mikulin AM-38 engine. This new power plant, generating 1,254 kilowatts or 1,682 horsepower, was specifically designed for low-altitude operations, where ground attack aircraft would spend most of their time. The AM-38 featured a reduced compression ratio, strengthened crankshaft, and a single-speed supercharger optimized for maximum power below 3,000 meters or 9,840 feet. The redesigned aircraft first flew on October 12, 1940, and immediately demonstrated superior performance characteristics. The production version, designated Ilyushin-2 in April 1941, weighed nearly 4,500 kilograms or 10,000 pounds, and could achieve a maximum speed of 414 kilometers per hour, 257 miles per hour. More importantly, It could carry up to 600 kilograms or 1,320 pounds of bombs while maintaining the heavy armament of two 23mm 23 cannons and two 7.62mm machine guns. The Ilyushin II's armor protection was unprecedented for its time. The cockpit was surrounded by steel plates varying from 5 to 12 millimeters or 0.2 to 0.5 inches thick, while the engine compartment received similar protection. Even the cockpit canopy featured 65 millimeters or 2.6 inches of bulletproof glass. The fuel tanks, radiators, and all critical systems were enclosed within this armored shell, creating what German pilots would later describe as a flying bunker. Production began at factory number 18 in Voronezh in March 1941, but only 70 of the first 249 aircraft produced were actually in service when Germany launched Operation Barbarossa on June 22, 1941. The timing could not have been worse. The Soviet Air Force was in the midst of a major reorganization, and most pilots had received minimal training on the new aircraft. During the first month of the war, the VVS lost over 4,000 aircraft of all types, with many Stormaviks destroyed on the ground or lost due to inexperienced pilots attempting unsuitable tactics. The German advance also threatened the production facilities themselves. As Wehrmacht forces pushed deeper into Soviet territory, critical manufacturing plants found themselves dangerously close to the front lines. The Soviet leadership faced a stark choice: evacuate the factories or risk losing them entirely to German forces. What followed was one of the most remarkable industrial achievements in military history. The evacuation of Soviet industry eastward began on the very first day of the German invasion. By the end of 1941, over 1,500 factories, including approximately 100 aviation facilities, had been relocated beyond the Ural Mountains. Factory number 18, the primary Ilyushin II production facility, was disassembled and transported from Voronezh to Kuibyshev, a journey of over 1,000 kilometers or 620 miles. Along with the machinery went thousands of skilled workers and their families, and traveling in overcrowded trains through a railway network already strained by military requirements. The human cost of this evacuation was enormous, but the alternative would have been catastrophic. Workers often arrived at their new locations to find nothing but cleared ground, with machinery arriving before buildings were constructed. It was not uncommon for production lines to begin operating in the open air while factory buildings were still under construction. Despite these incredible hardships, the relocated factories would eventually produce over 30,000 Stormaviks, ensuring the Soviet Union's ability to continue the fight. The production crisis became so severe that it attracted the personal attention of Joseph Stalin himself. In autumn 1941, as German forces approached Moscow, the Soviet leader sent his now famous telegram to factory directors. "You have let down our country and our Red Army. You have the nerve not to manufacture Ilyushin II's until now. Our Red Army now needs Ilyushin II aircraft like the air it breathes, like the bread it eats. Schenkman produces one Ilyushin II a day, and Tretyakov builds 1 or 2 MiG-3s daily. It is a mockery of our country and the Red Army. I ask you not to try the government's patience, and demand that you manufacture more Ilyushin II's. This is my final warning." The message, coming from a man who had ordered the execution of hundreds of thousands of officers for far lesser failures, proved highly motivational. Production increased dramatically within weeks. The early combat performance of the Ilyushin II revealed both its strengths and critical weaknesses. The aircraft's armor provided excellent protection against small arms fire and light anti-aircraft weapons, allowing pilots to conduct low-altitude attacks that would have been suicidal in conventional aircraft. However, the single-seat configuration left the aircraft vulnerable to attacks from behind, particularly from German fighters that quickly learned to exploit this blind spot. Soviet pilots reported devastating losses to Messerschmitt Bf-109 and Focke-Wulf FW-190 fighters that could easily outmaneuver the heavily loaded Stormavik. The solution came in early 1942 with the development of a two-seat variant featuring a rear-facing gunner armed with a 12.7mm BT machine gun. This modification required significant changes to the aircraft's center of gravity, leading to swept-wing leading edges and other aerodynamic improvements. The gunner's position was initially unarmored, making these crew members extremely vulnerable. Rear gunners suffered casualty rates 4 times higher than pilots, with many units struggling to maintain adequate numbers of trained gunners. By 1943, the Ilyushin II M3 model addressed many of these deficiencies. The rear gunner finally received 13mm or half an inch armor protection, while the wing design was further refined with 15-degree swept leading edges to improve handling characteristics. The uprated AM-38F engine provided additional power to compensate for the increased weight, bringing maximum speed to 425 kilometers per hour, or 264 miles per hour. The Ilyushin-2's true test came during the Battle of Kursk in summer 1943, the largest tank battle in history. Soviet forces had assembled over 2,800 Stormaviks for the defense, representing the largest concentration of ground attack aircraft ever deployed. The battle began with one of the war's largest air engagements, as German fighters scrambled to intercept a massive Soviet preemptive strike involving over 500 aircraft. During the Kursk battles, Soviet pilots developed the innovative circle of death tactic that would become synonymous with Stormavik operations. Up to 8 aircraft would form a defensive circle over the target area, with each aircraft protecting the one ahead with its forward-firing weapons. Individual Stormaviks would then peel away from the circle to conduct attack runs before rejoining the formation. This tactic provided mutual protection while allowing sustained attacks on German positions. The effectiveness of these attacks became the subject of considerable controversy. Soviet sources claimed that on July 7, 1943, 70 tanks from the German 9th Panzer Division were destroyed by Stormaviks in just 20 minutes. Other reports credited the aircraft with destroying 270 tanks of the 3rd Panzer Division and 240 tanks of the 17th Panzer Division. However, German records show that these units possessed far fewer tanks than claimed destroyed, leading historians to question the accuracy of Soviet battle reports. The discrepancy highlights a broader issue with assessing the Ilyushin-2's combat effectiveness. Pilot claims of tank kills were notoriously inflated across all air forces during World War II, with post-war analysis suggesting that fewer than 10% of tank losses were actually attributable to air attacks. The Ilyushin-2's weapons, while impressive, faced significant limitations against well-armored German tanks. The 23mm cannons could penetrate most tank armor only from steep diving angles, while the 8 RS-82 rockets, despite their armor-piercing capability, proved too inaccurate for consistent results. More successful were the PTAB anti-tank bomblets, small-shaped charge weapons weighing 2.5 kilograms or 5.5 pounds each. An Ilyushin-2 could carry up to 200 of these weapons in underwing dispensers, creating a carpet of explosions covering an area 70 meters long and 15 meters wide, or 230 feet by 49 feet. These cluster munitions proved highly effective against concentrations of vehicles and personnel, though their impact on heavily armored tanks remained limited. Despite questions about tank-killing effectiveness, the Ilyushin-2 proved devastating against softer targets. German supply columns, artillery positions, airfields, and infantry concentrations suffered enormous losses to Stormavik attacks. The psychological impact was equally significant, with German troops learning to fear the distinctive sound of the aircraft's approach. The Ilyushin-2's ability to operate from primitive forward airstrips meant it could provide immediate support to advancing Soviet forces, often appearing over German positions within minutes of being called for assistance. The human stories behind the Ilyushin-2's operations provide insight into the dedication and courage of Soviet air crews. Lieutenant Colonel Nelson Georgievich Stepanyan, an Armenian pilot known as the Storm Petrel of the Baltic Sea, flew over 239 combat sorties, and was credited with sinking 53 ships, destroying 80 tanks, 600 vehicles, and 27 aircraft. His final mission on December 14, 1944, ended when his damaged aircraft was deliberately rammed into a German warship in Liepāja harbor. Stepanyan was posthumously awarded his second Hero of the Soviet Union medal. Another remarkable figure was Senior Lieutenant Anna Alexandrovna Timofeyeva Yegorova, one of the few women to fly combat missions in male regiments. After initially flying reconnaissance missions in the fragile Polikarpov PO-2, she transferred to the 805th Assault Aviation Regiment and flew 277 sorties in Ilyushin-2S. In August 1944, her aircraft was shot down over German territory, and she survived a crash landing with severe injuries. Captured by German forces, she endured months in a concentration camp before being liberated by Soviet troops. Upon return to Soviet-controlled territory, she faced interrogation by Soviet security services, who suspected all former prisoners of collaboration. It was not until 1965 that she was finally awarded the Hero of the Soviet Union medal. The Ilyushin-2 played crucial roles in major Soviet offensives throughout the war. During the Stalingrad counteroffensive, Stormaviks helped strangle German supply efforts by destroying 72 aircraft on the ground at Skalsk airfield and shooting down numerous transport aircraft attempting to resupply the trapped Sixth Army. In the Baltic campaigns, squadrons like Stepanyan's devastated German shipping and coastal positions. During the final assault on Berlin, massed formations of Stormaviks provided close support for Soviet tank columns advancing through the city's rubble-strewn streets. The aircraft's production numbers tell the story of Soviet industrial mobilization. From the relocated factories in Kuybyshev, Saratov, and other cities beyond the Urals came a steady stream of new aircraft. By 1943, Ilyushin II-S comprised one-third of all Soviet combat aircraft in frontline service. Factory number 18 alone produced over 27,000 Stormaviks, representing 75% of total production. The simplified construction, using a mixture of steel, aluminum, and wood components, allowed production by semi-skilled workers under difficult wartime conditions. The Ilyushin II's influence extended far beyond World War II. Its concept of a heavily armored, dedicated ground attack aircraft would inspire post-war developments, including the Ilyushin 1L-10, which entered service in the final months of the war with improved performance and protection. More significantly, the Stormavik's legacy lives on in modern aircraft like the Sukhoi Su-25 Frogfoot, often called the Russian A-10, and indeed influenced the development of the American A-10 Thunderbolt II Warthog. The Su-25, which first flew in 1975 with test pilot Vladimir Ilyushin, son of the Ilyushin II's creator, at the controls, incorporated many lessons learned from Stormavik operations. Like its predecessor, the Frogfoot emphasized armor protection, multiple redundant systems, and the ability to operate from rough forward airstrips. The aircraft's titanium armor bathtub, protecting the cockpit and critical systems, represents a direct evolution of Ilyushin's original armored monocoque concept. The parallel development of the American A-10 during the same period shows how the Ilyushin II's innovations influenced global military aviation. Both the Warthog and Frogfoot prioritized survivability over speed, featured heavy armor protection, and were designed specifically for the close air support mission. The A-10's distinctive titanium bathtub protecting the pilot bears a striking resemblance to the Ilyushin II's armored cockpit, while its ability to absorb battle damage and continue flying echoes the Stormavik's legendary toughness. Modern analysis of the Ilyushin II's combat effectiveness reveals a complex picture. While claims of massive tank kills were certainly exaggerated, the aircraft's true value lay in its psychological impact and its ability to disrupt enemy operations across the entire depth of the battlefield. German commanders consistently reported that Stormavik attacks forced their units to disperse, seek cover, and abandon planned operations. The aircraft's presence overhead created a climate of fear and uncertainty that degraded German combat effectiveness far beyond the physical damage inflicted. The Ilyushin II also represents a triumph of industrial organization and determination. The evacuation and reconstruction of Soviet aircraft factories under wartime conditions ranks among the greatest logistical achievements in military history. Workers who had lost their homes, families, and communities somehow found the strength to rebuild production lines in Siberian cities and maintain output levels that ultimately turned the tide of war. The human cost of Ilyushin II operations was enormous. Soviet sources acknowledged the loss of over 15,000 aircraft during the war, with casualty rates that would be considered unacceptable by modern standards. In early 1942, one Stormavik was lost for every 24 sorties. During the Battle of Stalingrad, this improved to one loss per 10 to 12 missions. By 1943, as tactics improved and fighter protection became more available, the loss rate decreased to one aircraft per 26 sorties. These statistics represent thousands of young air crews who gave their lives in the service of their country. The technical legacy of the Ilyushin II continues to influence modern aircraft design. The concept of using armor as a structural element has been incorporated into numerous military aircraft, while the emphasis on redundant systems and battle damage tolerance remains a priority for close air support platforms. The aircraft's mixed construction techniques, combining steel, aluminum, and wood components, demonstrated that effective military aircraft could be produced using whatever materials were available. So, as the war progressed, over 115 variants of the basic Ilyushin II design were produced, including models equipped with skis for winter operations, different armament configurations, and even experimental versions mounting flamethrowers. This adaptability reflected both the aircraft's robust basic design and the innovative spirit of Soviet engineers working under extreme wartime pressures. The Ilyushin-2 Stormavik stands as more than just an aircraft. It represents the determination of an entire nation to resist invasion and preserve its independence. From Vasily Emelianenko's harrowing escape over eastern Ukraine to Nelson Stepanyan's final sacrifice in the Baltic, from Anna Yegorova's remarkable survival to the countless unnamed heroes who flew and maintained these aircraft, the Stormavik story is ultimately about ordinary people rising to meet extraordinary challenges. In an age where military technology continues to evolve at breakneck speed, the fundamental lessons of the Ilyushin-2, that determination, innovation, and sacrifice can overcome seemingly insurmountable odds, remain as relevant today as they were in the desperate years of World War II.